Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi here, Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast will be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll be covering a storm off the East Coast that'll be bringing rain along the coast and elevation-driven accumulating snows inland, north, and northeast. We'll be talking about heavy rain and potential severe weather from the Appalachians down to the Gulf Coast. We've got also some snow and rain into the Pacific Northwest, and we'll of course look at the week ahead in the long range. That's tonight. That's Sunday night on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. So we are sitting in the land of gloom and doom in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. It's been a real struggle all day because of this stationary boundary that's set up just to the south. So the warm air never really made it, even into places into southern New Jersey where we thought it might, and southern Pennsylvania fell well short. On the other hand, on the other side of that frontal boundary, from Baltimore south, particularly from Washington, D.C., southward through Virginia. We saw temperatures today hit the upper 70s to around 80, and 70s were very common all through the southeast. That frontal boundary continues southward and heads down to Louisiana, where we're starting to see the beginnings of the next storm system that'll be coming out, and that'll be the weather system that'll be impacting the east on Sunday. And you can see the blow up of bright white clouds going on in the central Gulf states. This area has been pounded with heavy rain all week, and they're going to get some more as that low develops. You see the breaks in the cloud cover south of that stationary boundary. I think we'll be able to squeeze out some improvement, though, later tonight and for Saturday, making for a decent day. We'll just keep our fingers crossed on that. We'll have a little bit of time in between the systems that we've been dealing with and the next one that's coming up for Sunday. And as we check out the radar this evening at 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time, much of the east is pretty quiet. You're beginning to see rain and some heavy rain and even some thunderstorms breaking out across South Texas and Southwest Louisiana. They're running up to the northeast. Also, some rain off the coast of Alabama and Mississippi. Also off the Florida coast, the Florida Panhandle and Southeast Louisiana. And we've got more energy and more precipitation coming in to the Pacific Northwest. The Storm Prediction Center, as we take a look at the severe weather risk, this is for Saturday. We're seeing a marginal to slight risk from southwestern North Carolina southward to the Florida Panhandle and the Gulf Coast, and that comes with a 2 to 5% tornado risk. And as we move on to Sunday, some general thunderstorm risk along the coast of the Carolinas down into Virginia. In the meantime, we've got precipitation, which is going to be on the order of 3/4 of an inch to about an inch or so from southern New England down through the mid Atlantic states, picks up to an inch, inch and a half from Virginia and West Virginia down into eastern Tennessee and portions of northern Mississippi, and then further south down into the Gulf Coast, and a clobbering of rain up and down the West Coast with an inch and a half down to San Diego. And you've got several to many inches from just north of San Francisco on up to the Pacific Northwest. That's been a constant over the last several days that we've seen that 7-day forecast be so bullish for precipitation out in the west. So we're going to switch over to the snow probability maps. I think they're fairly useful. They give you a decent idea of how this is going to play out. And one thing you will notice is that we have uh, these areas of high probability. They coincide with the major elevation areas, the Catskills, for example, the Berkshires, the southern end of the White Mountains going into Massachusetts. So these areas have the highest probability of seeing uh, heavier snowfall. And we're specifically talking about here that this system is going to be an elevation driven snowfall. You'll notice the probabilities of an inch, just 1 inch, down pretty low as you head down toward the coast. Long Island out of it, most of New Jersey out of it. You have to go to North Jersey to get into that 50% area, and north of Route 84 to get into that 50% area just for an inch. Now I'm going to jump it up to 4 inches and you see that there is 40 to 50% probability of at least 4 in the Catskills, and also a 30 to say 50% chance across much of Massachusetts, southern New Hampshire, and into southern Vermont. I think that there's going to be a max area of about 2 to 4, 3 to 6 inches. Forecasting elevation snows very, very difficult here. But the main action, I think, regardless of the amount, is going to be uh, north of Route 84 in New York State, north of Route 84 in Connecticut, northeastern Pennsylvania, from just south of Scranton, north and east into the Poconos. And that to me seems like the prime range, and also across southern New York, from west of Binghamton all the way back over into the Catskills, and uh, we'll update tomorrow on weather in 5. We'll put into some more specific numbers. I just happen to have a really tough time when it comes to forecasting elevation-driven snows. It's just difficult because the topography makes such a huge difference in what is happening. So we've got the stationary boundary, which should fall apart and move out. There's probably going to be just enough high pressure building in tomorrow to allow for at least some sunshine, and temperatures will be in the 40s, much like today. So we can't really say it's going to be cooler since today many places didn't get out of the 40s. Here's our low moving across the deep south into Alabama tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. The low moves into eastern Tennessee. You start to see heavy rain spreading up into the Appalachians. The low goes into southern West Virginia by Sunday morning. And this is going to be one of these deals with primary, secondary. There is marginal cold air at best in the Northeast. We've been talking about this high building down into southeastern Canada and how it had to perfectly time with this system. It just really didn't time perfectly. So you work with what you got, and what you got from the standpoint of cold air is really not much. But there is just enough higher pressures to the north to force this low to redevelop off the North Carolina coast and then run out to the northeast. You can see how the GFS handles this. It's got that bluish snow area there. It doesn't have those dark blue heavy snows. So that's kind of telling me that precipitation, the total precipitation amount with this is not, should not be a whole lot. And areas on the southern end of this might mix with some snow. Maybe it changes over for a little bit in northern New Jersey. Maybe it changes over in the lower Hudson Valley in southern Connecticut. Maybe it mixes on Long Island. A lot of maybes in this forecast. But the low pulls out. We'll see weather conditions improve on Monday. And next week looks like, I think it may overall wind up being a quiet week. We've got a low from the western lakes coming down out of Canada that's going to dive southeastward, but it's going to be forced pretty far to the south. So maybe you bring some precipitation into Virginia and North Carolina, and then that gets kicked out to the east. There's a weather front that approaches late in the week, but there's a fairly good chance that much of next week is just going to be on the dry side with mostly seasonal temperatures as we finish off the month of January and start the month of February. And maybe next weekend we could see some cold air pushing down from east central Canada. Kind of a bizarre weather pattern is setting up for next week and beyond. I don't know where this is going to ultimately wind up, but it ought to be interesting. It's always interesting. So don't forget, Sunday night, the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. We will see you then.